Welcome to Hourglass Cinema, a variety show from victims and villains, and today's feature is fantasia-fest 2021. I'm your host, Captain Nostalgia, and I am joined by the co-host of Abyss Gazing, Mr. Mark Moore.
Yo.
So, in this episode, we are going to be talking about movies that we have both watched for this year's fantasia-fest, and movies that we recommend you guys checking out when they finally come to streaming sites and or VOD and physical media as well. These are all going to be spoiler free, and you guys can also check out more of our Fantasia Fest coverage over at victimsandvillains.net/reviews, where you guys can read what we had to say about other films. Mark, let's go ahead and get into this one. This is one that you suggested to us. This was the first one that you watched, and the first film we're going to be talking about tonight is Alien on Stage.
I love that documentary. It was so cool. It's the short, non-spoilerish version. It's a bunch of bus drivers from like Dorset, England, I think it was, that do a fundraiser play every year, and they usually do comedies. And they got the guy that helps them write the plays. They got the genius idea to do Alien and turn it into a stage play. And it was amazing to see the process and how everything turns out, and I absolutely loved it.
I think me and you are going to differ on this movie slightly. I will give you the fact that, like, it is without a doubt interesting and truly amazing about how they take this iconic Ridley Scott movie and make it into this stage production that you feel like shouldn't really necessarily work as a stage production, and I'm going to say that it does not work. By the third act of this movie is basically them like doing a shortened version of this, because you also forgot to mention that like the entire goal of the production is to actually get into like sell out London's West End Theatre. Like that's the whole production of what they're trying to do.
So that's actually that wasn't even part of their plan. They talk about it's just a local theater they do the show in, and somebody from like the England's version of Hollywood happened to have seen the play and approached them about coming out there, and they didn't even know if they wanted to do it at first. That was part of the thing with it, is that they were approached after putting it on, and they said like 20 people showed up. And they thought it was going to be a flop, and suddenly they're playing in, was it West End Theatre or whatever?
Yep, West End Theatre in London.
Yeah, for a one-night show in London, and they made it work with props of like cardboard and duct work and spray paint. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was amusing and entertaining to watch average, everyday, normal people pull this off to the point that they get invited back multiple years in a row.
And I agree with you on that one. This movie kind of vaguely reminded me of last year's You Don't Know Me. And if you guys don't know what that is, that was the Showgirls documentary last year from RLJE Films. And a portion of that movie basically showed the impact of Showgirls, this super controversial 1995 NC-17 movie starring Elizabeth Berkley. And a portion of that, actually, there was a stage production that was a musical that really leaned into the absurdity of Showgirls. And it worked for that particular show, because if you've ever seen Showgirls, you know it is a very just it's a mess. It really is, and I mean, but its absurdity is the reason why it works. It's one of those cases of so bad it's good. And Alien, when you watch that film, Alien is it's a classic and a masterpiece for a reason. It is a genre touchstone for both the sci-fi genre and the horror genre. And
well, and your strong female lead as well.
yes, at a time where we weren't really getting strong female leads. Ripley really changed the game. And to me, like, I'm not the biggest fan of that franchise, but I understand its importance. And to me, I feel like this film in particularly really leans into that niche audience. And that is kind of why I would say that the film is kind of like, it's entertaining and it's interesting to watch it operate, but also at the same time, by the time you get into the third act where it's made the transition from documentary to just like a live stage production, it just falls apart for me. And I was grinding my teeth the entire time I was watching that third act, because it just seems like a mockery of Alien.
I found it amusing. They showed clips of some of their previous plays, and it's like these 50 and 60-year-old bus drivers, so you know you're not getting Ridley Scott. And instead of going serious, they're like, and I think I described it to you as like if Monty Python tried to put on Alien but was serious. And I thought it was wholesome. I would have paid to go see that play.
See, and like to your point, the clips of the other shows, like I'm like, these types of shows, they really work for what they're trying to do. And I would even say to a degree that like there's a point in the film where they talk about like other properties that they could have auctioned off. Like I would even argue that they could have done a Pulp Fiction in this kind of genre and it really wouldn't have felt like a mockery. But I don't know, like they just didn't do it really in a smart way for me. And I don't know, it didn't hit me the way that I guess it hit you. So let's talk Rorschach ratings real quick. 0 to 5, where does the Alien on Stage land for you?
I found it entertaining. It was a fun documentary. I liked it. I give it a 4.
Before I go, do you want to guess what I'm going to give it?
2.5.
Man, we have been working together way too long. Yes, a 2.5. My final thoughts, it's entertaining, but it feels very niche in its presentation. The production comes across, like I said, as a parody more than a love letter. So it is cool, and it is like inspiring to see normal people kind of do this kind of stuff. But I don't know, to me, like I would have rather them kind of take on something that would have fit their tone a little bit better.
I loved it. It was great. It was highly entertaining.
All right, well, next up on our docket, we're talking about The Last Thing Mary Saw. This one is basically it takes place in winter of 1834. That is hugely important to the plot of the film. Basically, the film tells the story of a blind woman as she recounts a forbidden love, and how that love actually made her blind. Mark, what did you think of this movie?
I'm a fan of like some of the slow burn and period pieces. This one, not so much. They had a few scenes that lead towards possible supernatural, but it's okay. And then other scenes that lead towards more towards superstition. And it was kind of a jumbled mess, and it all takes place. There's a book they show, and as the movie progresses, you realize that what's taking place is the book that they're reading. And it was very slow. It was not good to me in the slow burn genre of horror. I wasn't a fan.
I'm right there with you. I'm going to dare to say that this is probably the worst film that I've seen at this year's Fantasia-fest. I just was not a fan. Much like you, I had the same experience. I watched it, especially the way that it grips you right from the gate with the...
Yeah, the very beginning, you're like, oh, this is going to be sweet. And then it's like, when's it going to get sweet?
Yeah,
and you've got, I don't know if you noticed, it's got the girl from The Orphans.
Also,
she's in it.
Dead Silence. Mary Shaw,
brother that was in Lords of War or Lords of Chaos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this movie does have a lot of, like you said, like it has the young girl from Orphan. It has one of the Culkin brothers. It has the actors that played Mary Shaw in Dead Silence. It has a good cast, and it has a rich cinematography. That's also one of the things that I think that this film does really well, is that it looks gorgeous, it looks spectacular, and it's even, I would dare say, it's acted spectacularly too. But that the ending, and just the progressive nature of the film and how it unfolds is, like you said, they just keep giving you these red herrings of there's going to be something supernatural that's going to come of it. And honestly, with the whole LGBT angle that the film takes, I was honestly expecting a witch movie, and especially with the way that the film opens up and she's blind, and kind of the imagery that they present in telling us that she's blind, I was really surprised and really appalled that it was a bland melodrama love story.
Yeah, it was a lot of suspense or wannabe suspense with no payoff.
Yeah, and again, it had the movie really leaned into that stuff because, another great example of a film that's very similar in tone to this from this year is The Reckoning. And The Reckoning is now streaming on Shudder, and The Reckoning basically is kind of almost a very similar thing that's set up, but it's a witch movie, and the film really leans into the whole supernatural relationship with the devil and kind of the witch trial processes. And I was expecting something similar, and it just never rose. Especially there are points in the film where, especially the way that this film ends, and kind of the dread with how certain characters are no longer with the film they're no longer with us by the end of the film, how they end up dying is I was expecting a lot more from this film, and it just seems really blind and really slept on its own potential.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a touch more of a more character version of The Witch, and I thought that's the direction they were going to go. And it just never really went that direction. It's the story from a book that they're reading coming to life, essentially. And it's just, I don't know, I kept waiting for something to happen of interest, and nothing really happened.
Well, let's put this one through our Rorschach rating scale. Mark, 0 to 5, where does the last thing Mary saw end up for you?
I've seen worst in the festival so far, so I can give this one a 1, knowing that it's better than something else.
And I love the way that you phrase that. So I am also going to go with a 1 for this one. This film is just a dreadful melodrama. And honestly, if you want to see films that are set in this time period and are hinging on love, forbidden love, go watch Fear Street 1666. It is 10 times better than this movie.
Yeah, and if you want something similar style and all that, I'd go with The Witch in a heartbeat before this.
Yeah. So next up on our list is, while a lot of the films we're going to be talking about on here are newer releases that are premiering alongside this festival, we are also talking about the Spain-Portugal film Tombs of the Blind Dead from 1972. And this movie surprised me in a lot of ways. Let me just say that.
Yeah, so I read up a little bit on it. It's a remaster and I believe a recut that was specifically done for Fantasia, if I remember reading correctly. I know it was a recut and a remaster. It's a cool little horror flick it reminds you. There's some scenes that I actually thought kind of resembled some of the scenes from like Lord of the Rings, actually, which is odd for a horror movie, but hey, whatever. It was fun though, and Virginia is insane, and she's the reason for everything in this movie.
Yeah, so I guess let's do a quick plot summary. Virginia, who is one of three main characters, goes missing in a deserted town, and the other two main characters go to find her, only to discover that she has been dead. And their quest for answers results in a long line of answers that bring them back to the occult, zombies, and witchcraft. So this film is, like you said, like, it's a lot of fun, but I feel like what I was expecting for this, because I feel like one of the reasons that I was so drawn to like want to cover this movie was the fact that it was hinging on the fact that this is a zombie movie, and to a degree it is, but to a degree it's not.
They were, whatever they were far too intelligent, I want to say, to have been a zombie. They never say what they really actually are, the monsters. They almost act like a zombie, but they have intelligence in what they're doing. So I'm not sure what they fall under the category as.
And that's fine, and I want to be as vague as possible, because like that's one of the reasons that I really enjoyed this film, was just how much it exceeded my expectations, where this starts off and it seems like it's going to be a pretty straight zombie film. Like the entire first act of this film feels reminiscent of Psycho, the way that they take the Janet Leigh character, where you think you're going to spend the next 2 hours with this character, and that's not what happens. And they really divert expectations, but it's the stories of kind of like the background and how this film paces itself to constantly draw you closer to the edge of your seat, I think is something that they do really well. And I love the way that this film in particularly blends like the subgenres of zombie and possession films. I think that this film does a fantastic job of taking those two subgenres and making it a unique experience for the viewer.
Yeah, it's fun to watch from beginning to end, and it has that whole 70s horror Romero kind of vibe to it. My only issue, and I think I texted you while I was watching this, is my only issue with the movie is that it's like, what, an hour and 40 minutes and like an hour and 20 minutes is people screaming.
Well, it's not that like it's an hour and 20 minutes. I feel like the screaming, to your point, the acting isn't always the best, and I feel like that it kind of took me out of the movie, the way that characters would react to something that was going on screen, and you're like, man, like I could have done so much better than what you're doing.
But you're also, it was almost on par or a little bit above par for the genre of the time period. It's just that was my only distraction. Every time he turned around, there was constant screaming in the movie, and it was like, oh my God, can you please stop that? At certain points in the movie, and like nobody was responding to some of these screams. Like, I guess this is commonplace from where y'all are at, because nobody's like, hey, somebody's screaming. So that was the only distracting part. Outside of that, it was pretty cool to watch.
I'm also gonna even dare to say that there are certain portions of this film that felt a little bit longer for me than they necessarily had to be. Like, this film has a lot of just really silent, like, explorative landscape shots that don't need to be here. Like, at first, when Virginia's getting into this ghost town, it makes sense. But as other characters are coming into it, it just doesn't make sense to me. And it really kind of took me out of the film, where, like, here I'm expecting a horror movie, and it's really a nature documentary, it feels like it sometimes.
That didn't bother me. It felt more like they were trying to build on the fact that this place is out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like I said, I get that, but let's talk about let's put this through the Rorschach rating scale, 0 to 5. Where's this land for you?
A 3. A solid 3. It was entertaining. It's just the screaming bothered me and got on my nerves, but it's still a good movie.
I'm going to go a little higher than you and say 3.5. It's really rich with his mythos. I cannot say, like, cannot express how well this film handles its subtlety with its fantastical elements. It does a really great job at that.
It had a solid story to it, to the point that I think if somebody wanted to do a remake, keep it in the setting, in the area it's in the language it's in, but just kind of bring it up to date, kind of like they did with Dawn of the Dead and City of the Dead and stuff like that, I think it would make a solid modern remake, because it is a good story. It's a good plot all the way around.
I'd 100. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'd like to find out more about the cult a little bit. That would be cool to find out more about too.
I'd 100% be behind a remake of this movie. I hope that if you're going to do a remake, that you kind of get over the whole fact of the screaming a little bit, but also, to your point, yeah, it's also a product of its time in that period, in that sense.
Yeah, because I think Chainsaw Massacre was the main. I forgot the main character's name, but she spent half the movie screaming too. So I think it's just, like you said, it's a product of its time period.
Sally. The word you're searching for was Sally.
Sally. Okay. Gotcha.
All right, and next up we have Don't Say Its Name. Mark, what is Don't Say Its Name about?
It is Native Americans with a mining company, I believe it is slowly kind of moving into the area, follows a couple of the local law enforcement, and something supernatural starts killing people.
I really enjoyed this one. I'm just going to say that I really wasn't expecting it to be as rich as it was. And I think that this is kind of the first time we're seeing a film, at least in my experience with Fantasia this year, this is the first time that I've seen something that has a really well done social commentary.
I got the social commentary. That's I picked up on that. What I liked about it was I'm trying to think of the last horror movie I watched that revolved around a native community and some of their beliefs and things like that. And that's what I thought was pretty cool about it. And it wasn't some white dude in makeup playing a Native American or anything like that. It was tribes people from that region playing the characters. So I thought that was cool.
The word you're searching for is Blood Quantum, my dude. Blood Quantum. It's now streaming.
When did that come out?
It came out last year. It's now streaming on Shudder.
Really? Wow. I'll have to look that one up.
But yeah, I really agree. Like the social commentary, it eases itself in very well. There is a point in the film where I felt like it kind of came across a little bit heavy-handed, where like I was like, all right, cool, like I understand it, and then they like it just kind of seemed like it was no longer about the horror anymore. It was about the social commentary. And there is a point, it's like this movie's not too terribly long, but like there is a point where the movie where I'm just like it doesn't have that balance anymore. It just goes for that social commentary.
Yeah. I get that. I saw it, but to me it wasn't overboard. It was central to the story of why what was happening and why the targets were who they were. So it was a valid part of the story on top of being a commentary piece.
I guess I didn't look at it that way when I viewed it, but I completely understand where you're coming from, and I think another a part of the story is it's a mystery, because you're trying to kind of find out the source of what this vengeful spirit is, who it is, and most importantly, why it is targeting the people that it's targeting. And I gotta say, this film does not do red herrings well. One signature of a mystery film is that you are going to be able to do red herrings, and I was able to predict a lot of the stuff that happened before it actually happened. And that was kind of frustrating with me. Like, this film's very intelligent, but they just did not set up certain aspects of the mystery very well.
So how much of that is from watching so much horror that we know what all the tropes are by now? And how much of it was the actual story itself? Sure, we watched it, and I pretty much knew from the get-go what was getting ready to happen, and almost in what order. But it could just be that I've seen so much horror that it's kind of hard to kind of tell a new story at this point.
No, I don't think it's an oversaturation of genre or films, because I do genuinely have things that like still surprise me, and whenever I watch movies with my wife, I'm really terrible at like guessing like twist endings or like how something's gonna end. Like I showed my wife Tenet last year, and I'd seen it before her in the theaters, and we got like probably like halfway through it, and she guessed the ending, and I was like just flabbergasted that like she was able to do that. But she's been able to do that through several films. She just reads into things very, very well, whereas I don't think about how something is going to end or how characters are going to be. I process after I get done viewing a film. And so like when I'm like sitting down and thinking like what makes a movie good and what makes a movie bad, those are the kind of things that I consider. And so my justification of saying that this film doesn't do red herrings well is pondering all of the elements of how characters were used in certain situations that probably could have been avoided had the movie kind of balanced, you taken some of its intelligence with this commentary and used it for its characters.
Now, how much of that also is the environment? You said you saw Tenet first in the theater, which is typically, for most people, a different experience than watching it at home. You got the distractions and comfort of being at home, where when you're in a theater, you have a giant screen, full surround sound in the dark, and you're immersed in the movie.
Also, again, I always try and separate myself from things. I mean, to your point, like, environment might have something to play on it, but for this particular screening, I was locked away completely in a room with my headphones and my laptop and a notebook. That was it.
Yeah, I was casting it to my big screen in my living room. So, yeah.
All right.
I don't know.
Well, let's talk about our Rorschach rating for this film. 0 to 5. Where does Don't Say Its Name land for you?
I put it at 3.5.
I'm also going to land it at a 3.5. I think this film does a great blend of social commentary, folklore. There are some tonal inconsistencies that I could have done without, and the acting was a tad campy, if I'm being honest, and that kind of goes back into those tonal issues. It's a great movie, though.
It does have a B movie feel to it, and the only real distracting part for me was the mix of traditional effects with CGI. It was not a big budget movie, so that blend wasn't quite fitting.
All right, next up, we're going to be talking about a film that is slightly... It's weird, but it's also a short film, and it is called Sexy Furby. Mark, I watched this way before you, and I was like, I need to talk about this. Like, I would love to do an hour podcast with you just on Sexy Furby alone. I'm not going to say it's the best movie that I've seen at Fantasia this year, but I will say that it is probably the most haunting that I've seen at Fantasia this year.
Oh, what is wrong with you for watching that and enjoying it? That was so insane.
So
it reminded me of some of the crazy shorts we saw for Unnamed Film Festival. There was some crazy stuff in there too, and that's what it reminded me of, was like somebody's lack of sleep turned into a story.
So all right. So basically, for those of you guys that don't know, a woman basically falls in love with this humanoid Furby. Who every time that she disembowels him, she gets rich, and this richness quickly turns into addiction, and then she strangely finds Jesus. It's a weird movie. It's a weird short film. I just want to say that. But I have to say that I love imagery like this. Like, I another film that I reviewed this year, which you guys can check out my review, is called Junkhead. And Junkhead just had some of the strangest, just like, the imagery is on par with like Hellraiser 2. Like, it's just out there. And it helped really establish the film as its own identity and like individual source, and that's what I felt here for Sexy Furby, is that the imagery, especially during like the last like few shots where they're in the golf course and they have that like weird Play-Doh things on their face and like terrible wigs, like I was like, I don't know what's going on right now, but I am 100% about this.
I feel like I wasn't in the right mind to watch that movie. I'm not condoning to do drugs, but watching this, it might have been helpful.
Also, it should be worth mentioning that, again, Mark and I have a bit of an age gap. I grew up in the year of the Furby. I'm a weird guy. I love creepy stuff, and I still have a Furby that sits on my bookshelf, and I have another one in my closet. Like, Furbies are a legit thing in my household. So, like...
Yeah, I was an 80s kid. You found everybody in the neighborhood by where all the bicycles were. We drank from water hoses. So, yeah, there's...
That's okay. That's okay, man. So, yeah, I gotta say this, man. Like, this short film is just bonkers weird, and I'm all about it. Like, thanks to our friends at Grindsploitation Film Festival and Genre Blast, I've truly started garnering an appetite for short films like this. So let's put this through our Rorschach rating scale, 0 to 5. Where does this land for you?
It's so weird. I have to give it at least a 2.
Yo, in the words of Matthew McConaughey, them rookie numbers, you got to pump them up. This film easily gets a 4 from me. It's weird, it's original, it's wild, and it's one of those to go back to like Showgirls. It's so bad it's good.
It's just bad. That's all I can say. But it's so weird. There's some entertainment value to it. And it's still better than something else I've watched for this festival so far.
Keeping in line with the themes of short films, I didn't get a whole chance to check out a whole bunch of short films from this year's fantasia-fest lineup. But I did check out the movie The Booth, which is a 7-minute documentary. It's really weird to watch a documentary in short film format. Let me just start off by saying that I came to this because, and I guess maybe this is showing my naivety and my age, but so The Booth basically is a chronicling of adult video store arcades, and kind of like what they are, and kind of how they're still very much a niche, but still very much a desirable format. And I'm going to be honest, I came to this, I was like, oh, arcades in pornography stores. That sounds interesting. And no, the first act, the first opening scene of The Howling makes a lot more sense now. Because I had never heard that term before.
Yeah, I had seen it listed in the different movies and stuff for fantasia-fest, and I almost watched it, but you're telling me pretty much exactly what I thought it was about.
Yeah, so for those guys that don't know what a video arcade is, basically it is a small room with a projector and a coin slot and like a bench, and basically what you do is you pay like whatever, I think it's like 25 to like 75 cents, and basically you get to watch a pornographic film and the privacy of kind of like your own theater. They talk about like kind of like, you think in the age of the internet, like this really wouldn't still be like a prevalent thing, but there's still very much audiences that really desire and really stick by this. And it's interesting because this film specifically looks at like the influence of The Booth in the New York scene. So I mean, it was interesting, and I will definitely say I learned something that I didn't know was a term. But I mean, it's just kind of, it was what it was. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5.
Really? 3 out of 5 on a short movie about porn booths?
Yes.
Okay. Well, to each their own.
I mean, we can talk. We can get into some confusing topics because you're up with Hotel Poseidon.
This is true. Hotel Poseidon was a strange movie, to say the least. It is, I believe it was French. So it is subtitled, which I don't have an issue with. I watch subtitle movies off and on all the time. But the issue I had with Hotel Poseidon was that it was Dutch. Sorry, Dutch. Was that it made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. Like, the first maybe 15 minutes, there was some story there, and it's listed as a horror comedy, but I didn't find anything in the movie at all comedic whatsoever. It was just, things didn't make sense. The farther the movie you got, the less things made sense.
So, I hate to interrupt you real quick. I have the plot summary line pulled up from IMDb.
Right.
So this is what the movie is about. Quote, Dave reluctantly pretends to be the manager of Hotel Poseidon, where fungus grows on the walls, and comments such as "faded glory" and "has seen better days" completely falls short to describe the establishment. He wanders the corridors of his personal overlook hotel like a zombie, being a passive spectator to what happens around him, whether it's clients without cash, his mother concentrating him, castrating him, sorry, with her sharp tongue, or sick aunt in the hallway wherein pension keeps the place going. Dave will gradually lose his balance and tumble into a walking nightmare in which his hotel is transformed into a essential purgatory with inner demons of the booze, lustful creatures tempting his lonely soul to sin, and a big plunge into the proverbial metaphysical shithole. Dave can expect some strong comments on TripAdvisor.
Well, very little of that I could have picked up on actually watching it. Maybe it was just me. It could have possibly just not been my type of movie. I did not enjoy it. I did not like it. It seemed like it was, at a certain point, it almost seemed like it was trying to be like a really artsy version of Mother, which was an artsy movie in itself.
Yeah.
But things just didn't make sense the way it jumped around, and it just, I didn't like it. I think I've only ever given 1 0 out of 5. This may get a half out of 5 simply because there was some interesting scenery. And that was about all I could give it positive.
That's troubling to hear because I really was really drawn in by the artwork for this movie, and had I had a little bit more time to explore, because the thing about being a podcaster is that we also have day jobs that we have to provide for our family. But I really did want to check it out. I just kind of ran out of time for it. It was on my list, and
it looked interesting. It read interesting. Some of the art for it was cool. Like I said, some of the scenery was good, but the way the whole thing played out was just, I don't know. Maybe it just wasn't my kind of movie. I mean, that is always a possibility, because anytime we watch movies and have to review them, we're always going to have our own personal bias in it. So maybe that's just what the case is for this one.
Yeah, all right. So you're still up. Next, you have Baby Money.
Baby Money. A stripper finds out she's pregnant and assists as the getaway driver for like a home burglary. In typical fashion with these kind of movies, everything that can go wrong does go wrong. Somewhat generic. It was decent. It was good. But if you've seen one of those style movies with the home invasion gone wrong, then you kind of know what's going to happen. It's just like all those other movies that are just like it. Um, it's good, not great, not bad, entertaining. If you're looking for something to watch and come across it, I'd probably go 2.5, 3 out of 5.
Well, I mean, you got to choose one or the other. It's got to be a definitive rating. Is it a 2.5? Is it a 3? You know.
I'll go 3 because at least it was entertaining. It's significantly better than Hotel Poseidon.
Yeah, some of these movies this year at Fantasia, like it's weird to describe because I feel like they've either been like really good, like broadcast an intrusion signal that is just immediately climbed into my top 10 of the year. Pompo, the Cinephile is another one, which was a huge surprise for me because it's an anime, and I'm not typically an anime kind of guy, and I just fell in love with that movie. And then I have stuff that I see on like the opposite end that I'm just like, I don't understand why this movie exists, and I don't know, you know, who I should see, and like what would I should see in this. Like the last thing that Mary saw, we talked about earlier in the show. Like I don't know, like it didn't appeal to me. It just kind of was very melodramatic, and kind of keeping on that note, the next one that we both watched was actually Martyrs Lane, which is coming to Shudder beginning September 9th. How would you describe what Martyrs Lane is about?
Martyrs Lane, little girl, her mom living with, I believe it was her dad, who's a priest, and she starts seeing a little girl who starts giving her clues. The mom is kind of distant and cold towards her. Everybody kind of picks on her, and it's a story that kind of shows why the relationship is the way it is, with a supernatural twist to it.
So I have to say, like, this movie, it had like real moments in its like genuine moments within its first 2 acts, but there wasn't enough to like really keep me invested into these characters. But it was paced well enough to where I was like, all right, like these moments where I'm like, all right, like I want to know a little bit more about this relationship. So basically, like, to elaborate a little bit what you talked about and not getting into spoilers, this little girl kind of befriends an angel, basically, and the course of their friendship is kind of like the bent on where the supernatural element comes in, because it gets a lot darker. But I feel like I called the darkness, the darkness kind of like where it went, because there's one scene in particular that I don't want to spoil here, but in particular where I was like, that's not what she really is then, because like, you know, being a Christian, like I understand like the difference between angels and demons and stuff like that, but this movie, I feel like the last like 15 minutes, like the slow burn of it, like I won't say like paid off for me enough to like truly love this, but it was cool the way that they kept you guessing until the very end.
There was enough going on with it as a slower style movie that it at least keeps you involved in it. So you pay attention, wanting to know what's going on, as opposed to some of the others that we've seen over the last little while, since this trend of the slow burn has kind of picked up over the last few years, that are just, I'd rather run face first into a wall, because that would be more entertaining with some of these. But Martyrs Lane, I enjoyed it. It was decent. It wasn't the best of that style movie that I've ever seen. but it's got enough going on that it keeps you engaged, it keeps you drawn in, and you keep watching, hoping to get some sort of final payoff.
Yeah,
And it does give you something. It could have been better, but it wasn't bad.
yeah, the mystery that's woven into this film and is really well paced. And it's really well placed too, because you have this mystery that's running simultaneously with this mother-daughter relationship, and you're trying to understand why there's like an overly emotional mother, but also kind of this like strain on their relationship. And I really enjoyed kind of like that aspect, because I felt like their relationship, as the film progressed, really fed into the mystery, and by the end the two became one.
Yeah, they kind of, the daughter gets what she wants, and the mother admits what the issue is, and they become closer as parent and child. But you also get an understanding of why the mother is the way she is to begin with.
Yeah, that ending puts the entire, like, changes. It's one of those movies that literally changes the entire film and how you look at it. Because like by the time I got done with it and kind of like saw how everything was, I was like, all right, like I didn't necessarily always like the journey that it took to get here, but I have more respect for this film because it played the end game on me as an audience.
Yeah, it played towards its strength came from playing towards that relationship, because they knew what was coming in the long run when they were making it, and
Yeah.
you don't find out until the end what's really going on, and that's what gave it a decent payoff. But you don't realize the whole movie with what's going on between the little girl and the angel, so to speak, that there's more to it than just the task to progress the story. It's bringing things up and causing story elements to move forward that lead to the mother and daughter becoming closer in the long run.
Yeah, and so this one you guys can stream on Shudder beginning September 9th. Mark, on our Rorschach rating scale, what would you give this one out of 5?
3.5.
I'm going to go with a 3, just a little bit lower than you. I did it, like I said, like the payoff to this one is really well, but some of the journey to that payoff is kind of a little bit lackluster, and it's kind of a dull, slow burn at points.
Yeah, but that's kind of common with that style movie in general. It's always got little dull, slow points, or in some cases, entire slow dull points. But this kind of fell in the middle. It had enough going on that you wanted to know what was going on without wondering at what point you were going to like fall into a narcoleptic coma.
Well, our next film is 30 years in the making. I, unfortunately, was not able to catch this one. I'm really bummed about this one, but it is Mad God. Mark, you got to see it. What did you think about it?
Oh my God. Mad God. Where to begin with Mad God? I can tell you it starts with the whole Tower of Babel story, and talks about scripture from Leviticus, and God is I'm a jealous God, there should be none before me, and all that stuff. Then it goes into a combination of stop motion and claymation and live acting that is just completely insane. I think this is one of those movies that's not meant to be watched sober. And that's the only way I know to put it. It's crazy. You don't even know what you're looking at sometimes. It starts off with a gas masked individual. After you get past that opening, a gas masked individual being lowered essentially from the heavens, and he's getting shot at by various beings. I don't even know what they are. They don't even make it clear what they are. And some things he runs into are the size of ants, but they're people. Other things are 10 times the size he is. And it was really hard for me to follow. I know it was like a descent into madness, so to speak, or at least that's the way it came across. It's one of those movies that kind of just leaves you like, what in the hell did I just see? Because it's just so much to take in, so much going on, and just very little elements of story to explain what's actually happening. Even though there's so much going on, it's not really telling you much.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, it's almost like some of the old Tool videos made to a NC-17 rating and turned into an hour and a half movie.
I mean, that sounds that I would like I said I was really bummed that I didn't get to see this because this was on my list. This was high on my list of things I wanted to see this year. And I'm completely fine with waiting a little bit more. You know, obviously this film has been in the process of making for nearly, well, my entire life, honestly.
Like, I didn't know that. I didn't know it had been in the process that long. Is it just that it was finding somebody to put it out, like some of Zombies' early movies did? Or is it just they were working on it that long? Or
I don't know the reason why it took so long to make. I think it might have been one of those projects similar to Boyhood where they would work on it for a little bit at a time and then go to other projects and then come back. But I don't know the entire reason as to why it was.
I'm honestly, on the scale from 0 to 5, I really don't know how to score this one. Simply because it's got so much going on. It may just be one of those you have to watch a couple times. Maybe meet the right person that knows how to explain it to you. I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to begin to rate this thing, to be honest. It's so bizarre, the movie that it is.
I mean, can you rate it on originality alone?
If you went with originality, the only thing close to it I've seen is, like I said, a Tool video, and that would be Child's Play in comparison. For originality and watching something you've never seen before, maybe a 2.
Okay.
But if you figure out what it's about completely, let me know.
All right, so we're just going to put that down as a 2. What's your favorite film so far that you've seen at this year's Fantasia-fest?
Paul Dude's Deadly Lunch Break.
Which you guys can read his review on our website, either now, hopefully with the dropping of this episode, or later this week.
Yeah, Paul Dude's Deadly Lunch Break is fantastic. I'll put it that way. That was the shining gem for me of this whole thing.
This year for me, I mentioned it earlier, Broadcast Signal Intrusion absolutely stole my heart. It is the right blend of conspiracy theory, bizarre, haunting imagery, and just a character study and social commentary that just works on incredible fronts. The performances are riveting. The pacing is just amazing, and it's coming out in October at some point, and I honestly am planning a trip to the theater to see it again. It's so freaking good. So
one of the things I've come to realize is this is the, I think, 3rd festival I've covered with you, or with Victims and Villains in general, is that you end up coming away with 1, maybe 2 movies that you loved. A bunch of stuff that seems to be like, okay, that was cool, that was fun, whatever, and then some stuff that just leaves you scratching your head.
I always go in with, like, these festivals, I always go in with kind of like medium expectations and like not sure what to expect. And some of the ones that like I've seen this year, like I'm pulling up my list right now of just things that like I've seen this year as far as like festivals. Like my favorite movie of this year is The Stylist, which we're going to be covering in a couple weeks on Abyss Gazing, and I saw that through a festival. I saw that through the Berlin Final Girl Film Festival, and it has remained my top #1 movie ever since. I've watched it more than any other movie this year. I absolutely adore and love that movie. Bad Girls is another film that I caught at Grindsploitation this year. It's just a completely bonkers movie. It sits at number 10 for my favorite movies of this year, and I mean, just a lot of the movies that like I have come across, like in my top 25, Sexy Furby's in there.
Wow, really?
Absolutely.
That movie was so weird.
I want a full-length feature, so if the filmmaker behind that happens to hear this, please make a full-length feature.
Now, see, I would have to put, out of the ones I've covered, which, again, this is like the first year I've really covered any of these festivals, but Paul Dude would be in there. And there was one at the Unnamed Footage Festival?
Film Footage, yeah.
They had one. It was like 1976 or something was the name of it. Mm-hmm. That one was really good, too. That one was one of those that kind of came up, and I watched it because it was there, and it was awesome. We actually talked about it in the podcast we did on it.
Yeah. So if you guys got to check out some of the films from fantasia-fest this year, tweet to us and let us know what you guys love about it. I am really curious, honestly, because the guest that we have for The Stylist is actually, she's also been covering fantasia-fest. I'm curious to hear what her favorite movie this year was. But as we're winding down on fantasia-fest this week, marks the big screen return of Elijah Wood, and I got a chance to actually see his brand new movie, No Man of God. This movie is so it's him. It stars him and Luke Kirby, and basically, and it tells the true story of FBI profiler Bill Hagmaier, who's played by Elijah Wood, and serial killer Ted Bundy, played by Luke Kirby. I'm gonna say that this movie literally comes alive by Kirby's portrayal of Bundy, and just to kind of put this in perspective of how far this actor has come in 20 years, one of the roles that he's most famous for is Halloween Resurrection. This guy has come a long way in 20 years. His performance and his mannerisms as Bundy is just incredibly like transformative, and it's haunting how accurate he gets him. And they make him really sympathetic. I think that the first film that you and I ever covered together was the Netflix Zac Efron Ted Bundy movie, and I thought that was fine. But I think that Kirby is probably now my favorite representation on screen of that. And the movie really, it's one of those movies that lives and dies by his performance. And this movie, I will say also too, it's a paint by numbers film, and when it comes to kind of like the biopic thing, a large portion of the film basically takes place within an investigation room. There are a couple scenes that outside of that, but I mean the majority of this movie takes place in one room, and so you have to really kind of make it compelling. And so I think it's really interesting to kind of watch the relationship between Hagmaier and Bundy really grow as the film, and the film chooses some really interesting transitional choices to kind of transition between the years. There's these like VHS almost like cut scenes, and it's just really interesting the way that they decided to cut, because this movie essentially takes place over 4 to 5 years. But there are a lot of really compelling moments in this one. So,
and it's pretty much just in the interrogation room where they're talking back and forth.
For the majority of it, yes. So it basically, to kind of give you guys a place on like where it starts, is it starts at the top, where Hagmeyer kind of becomes is like still fresh to Quantico, in like I want to say 82 or 83, and it goes up until about 88 or 89. So it covers a good portion of their relationship. I'm gonna give this one a 3 out of 5. Like I said, like Luke Kirby's performance is really good. Not to say that Elijah Wood's performance or Robert Patrick or any of the other cast does a terrible job. They're like I said, their performances are, along with the movie, are pretty much like paint by numbers. Like we've seen this before, but it's really Kirby's performance that elevates and electrifies the film to life.
So it sounds similar to the concept of like, was it Dinner with Andre?
Yes.
It's basically two old friends catching up at a dinner table at a restaurant. So it sounds like it's that style movie, just an interview with Bundy.
Yes, and so you guys can check. Man of God is going to be available in theaters, on demand, and digital beginning August 27th. So, yeah, that's all we have for you guys on this super-sized episode of Hourglass Cinema, where we have covered so many movies in the scope of fantasia-fest. We also have 10 reviews written up for the website that we didn't even talk about on here. We have a couple reviews on the YouTube page as well. We'll provide links in the descriptions below. But yeah, so you guys can read our reviews of Broadcast Signal Intrusion, Pompo the Cinephile, Woodlands Dark, and Days Bewitched, a history of folk horror, Junkhead, We're All Going to the World's Fair, all online, and you guys can also check out Mark's reviews of The Righteous, Hellbender, Glasshouse, Paul Dudes, Deadly Lunch Break, and Agnes, both of which last two are like polar opposites from what I've read.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they couldn't get much more opposite.
But you guys can follow us everywhere at Victims and Villains. Mark, where can people find you online?
I just do my painting and show up in Titanium Juggernaut painting on Instagram.
Yeah, you guys can follow me. I am on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. You guys can follow me on TikTok as well. I am at Gent Ghostface, and you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net. You guys can find links to all of our social media, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch, along with more episodes like the one you're currently listening to, movie reviews for the rest of our Fantasia coverage, and more, along with our mental health resource library. So that is going to do it for us on this episode. Have a great night, guys.
Toodles.